The Senate Finance Committee passed its version of health care reform by a 14-9 vote on Tuesday of this week. And now the president's chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, is negotiating with Senate Democrats behind closed doors. So much for transparency, the future of health care. Joining me now is John Tamny, editor of Real Clear Markets and senior economist with H.C. Wainwright Economics. John, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Hey, Judge.
So what can we expect if the legislation endorsed by the Senate Finance Committee yesterday becomes law and the government proposes to spend $829 billion on top of what it's already spending in the next 10 years?
Oh, boy, where do we begin? I read over some of it today, and first off, the major rule here is that insurance companies will no longer be able to refuse insurance coverage to sick patients. Well, this is the equivalent of telling car insurers that they must insure someone who drives up with a totaled car, and, oh, by the way, you're going to have to pay for it. The Baucus bill intends to get more Americans insured, but it's going to create the exact opposite incentive there. If you know that you're going to get insurance regardless of when you ask for it, the trick is going to be wait to pay for it until you're sick.
Right. Right. And then the insurance carrier, the hapless insurance carrier to which you're assigned or which you choose, will be forced to cover you, knowing in advance that it's going to have to pay out more to you and in your behalf than it's going to receive from you in a premium payment.
Most definitely. And so we have yet another situation. We've already seen corporate bailouts. We've seen bailouts of homeowners. And now the responsible in this country are going to bail out the irresponsible. Those who already have insurance are necessarily going to see their insurance rates go up to pay for this. There's no way around this. There's this belief in Washington that Americans are just so dim as to believe that something's free. And this is so transparently not free. It's just allowing more and more of the irresponsible in this country to reach into the pockets of those who aren't.
You know, Congress thinks it can write any law it wants, and it could write a law, and before the courts declare it unconstitutional, it can force people to buy insurance, and it can force insurance companies to insure the uninsurable. But one thing Congress can't do is keep a bankrupt insurance industry still in existence. Do you think that what we saw earlier this week with the bill approved by all Democrats and one self-proclaimed Republican on the Senate Finance Committee is intended to drive private insurance out of the marketplace so that we all have the single payer?
I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think you're absolutely right. Clearly, stating the obvious, Economics 101, if this bill passes, those who now insure individuals will get out of the business because this is a bankrupting bill for the reasons we've discussed. And so what this means is this is a backdoor way for Congress in a couple of years to say, look, there is no private insurance market, so we have to come in and offer government insurance ourselves. It's so transparent, and I wish I'd thought of that.
When the government and the Bush administration agreed to provide prescription drug coverage to those on Medicare, it added $400 billion in Medicare costs. Now the Obama administration, and together with our friends on the Senate Finance Committee, think they can save a couple of $100 billion from Medicare. How can they possibly do that? 5 years ago, they added $400 billion. Now they say they can save $500 billion. They can't just pull the money out of thin air.
Well, in Washington, they assume they can, but, I mean, obviously, you're correct. There's no way they can save this kind of money, particularly because I think a lot of people, a lot of doctors, if nothing else, are going to exit the industry altogether. They're not going to save this money. And what else is interesting is this plan that they have, they're going to tax Cadillac plans to pay for this. This is classic Calvin Coolidge economics. He once said that when you target big incomes, they tend to disappear.
Right.
If they plan to tax the Cadillac plans, get ready for those to disappear also. And what that means is for the average American who does not have a gold-plated health insurance plan, invariably the government is going to have to go farther and farther down to tax lower quality insurance plans in order to pay for it.
John, if health care is a right, a position that you and I reject, to me, and I think to you, health care is a good. But if the government treats health care as a right to which Americans are entitled by birthright or by some bizarre theory under the Constitution, what's next? Food, shelter, clothing, my neighbor's Porsche convertible for everybody?
Where do you stop from here? I mean, I hate to engage in cliche, but it's a slippery slope. In this case, we have a lot of rights if they're going to use health care as an example. And what's frustrating is I do know in looking at the Constitution that I do have a right to not be robbed. And this is what this right that they're imposing on the country is. They are allowing the irresponsible to rob the responsible. And I know the Constitution protects me from that. And speaking to someone who knows the Constitution infinitely better than I know that there's nothing in the Constitution that empowers the federal government to have any role in health care to begin with.
You got that right. Unfortunately, the members of Congress will never take their oath, with a few exceptions like my next guest, will never take their oaths to uphold the Constitution seriously. John Tamny, thanks very much for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thanks, Judge.